All right, let's talk about a guy who looked at the entire world of English poetry and basically decided to set it on fire and build something new from the ashes. We are talking about William Wordsworth, and his ideas were so radical, so revolutionary, they didn't just change poetry. They changed how we think about art, about who gets to be an artist, and even how we understand our own feelings. So, you gotta picture the scene, right? It's the late 1700s. And poetry, it's a very stuffy affair. It's all about gods and goddesses, kings and queens, and it's written in this super fancy, decked-out language that absolutely nobody uses in real life. It was for the educated, the elite. Think of it as artificial, ornamental, and locked down by some seriously strict rules. And then Wordsworth comes along. He looks at this whole world of so-called poetic diction, and he asks this one simple question that would just ignite a revolution. What if poetry wasn't just for a select few? What if it was for everybody? And that question led to a book that was really more of a manifesto for a totally new kind of art. Okay, let's get into it. In 1798, Wordsworth and his buddy Samuel Taylor Coleridge, they published this collection called Lyrical Ballads. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a book of poems. In the preface, Wordsworth basically lays out his mission statement. He says this is a deliberate experiment, a plan to completely flip the poetic traditions of his time on their head. I mean, look at this. Wordsworth was drawing some serious battle lines. Over here, you've got the old guard, poetry about epic heroes, written in language so flowery you need a dictionary, and it's for a tiny, tiny educated audience. But his vision? It was totally democratic. He wanted to write about humble people, shepherds and kids, using the actual words that people spoke every day, for an audience of, everyone. So to even start a revolution like this, Wordsworth knew he had to redefine the artist themselves. He wasn't really interested in the fame or the status of being a poet. For him, the question was much, much deeper. It wasn't about who gets to be a poet, but what is a poet fundamentally? What's their essence, their soul? And this is his answer. It's so simple, but it's unbelievably revolutionary. A poet is simply a man speaking to men. That's it. Not some prophet shouting from a mountaintop, not some mysterious genius who's totally separate from the rest of us. Just a person, a human voice, speaking directly to other humans. Okay, so if the poet is just a person, what makes them special? Well, for Wordsworth, it's a difference in degree, not in kind. The poet isn't a different species. They just feel things more intensely. They have a more lively sensibility, More enthusiasm, a deeper feel for human nature, and what he called a more comprehensive soul. Basically, they're just paying closer attention and feeling it all a little bit deeper than most. Now, if the poet is just an ordinary person, it only makes sense that their language should be ordinary too. This is where Wordsworth really goes on the attack. He saw the poetic diction of his time as this huge, pointless barrier. It was stale, it was artificial, and it stood in the way of expressing any kind of real, genuine human feeling. Just look at how ridiculous this was. I mean, why in the world would you say the finny tribe when you just mean fish? Or talk about some god named Phoebus driving his car when all you're trying to say is the sun is out? Wordsworth saw this as just dishonest decoration, totally disconnected from real life. So his solution was pretty radical. He said, let's go straight to the source. Let's use the language that people actually use, especially people who live simple lives in the countryside. He believed that out there, away from the artificial manners of the city, people's emotions were more direct, more honest, and more deeply connected to the natural world. All right, so we've got a new kind of poet and a new kind of language. But what about the poem itself? Where does it actually come from? Well, this brings us to what is probably Wordsworth's most famous and, let's be honest, most misunderstood idea about poetry. Let's just let that sit there for a second. Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. This one sentence is basically the entire engine of his creative process. But what does it actually mean? Okay, let's break it down, because it's actually a pretty simple two-step process. First, you have a powerful experience. You feel something deeply. But here's the key. You don't write the poem right then and there. No, you wait. Later, when you're in a calm, quiet state, that's the tranquility, you think back on that experience. That's step one, recollection. Then, as you're reflecting, the emotion starts to come back.
But this time, it's filtered through your memory and your thoughts, and that is when it surges forth, the spontaneous overflow that becomes the poem.
So you see, the really crucial part here is that it's not just about spilling your guts onto the page. It's a disciplined process. That moment of tranquility, of reflection, is what shapes the raw passion into art. It's this perfect balance of genuine feeling on one side and thoughtful control on the other that gives the poem its real power. It keeps it from just being, a sentimental mess. And you can see this theory just brilliantly at work in his actual poems. Take a poem like Michael. He tells the simple, heartbreaking story of a shepherd and his son, all in plain language, and it becomes this incredibly powerful meditation on loss and memory. Or look at Tintern Abbey. The entire poem is literally the process in action. It's Wordsworth standing in a place he hasn't seen in 5 years, reflecting on that memory and how it shaped who he is. It's his whole philosophy, right there on the page. So you might be thinking, okay, cool, a 200-year-old theory about poetry. Why does this matter to me now? Well, it matters because this revolution was never just about literature. It was about how we understand art, our own emotions, and even ourselves. For Wordsworth, you see, poetry had a job to do. It wasn't just some pretty thing to admire. It was a moral force. By letting us step into the shoes and the feelings of other people, whether it's an old shepherd or a lonely child, it deepens our sympathy. It reminds us of this fundamental, shared humanity that connects all of us. And his ideas? They're totally woven into the way we think today. Seriously, think about it. Our modern obsession with authenticity over corporate jargon, that's Wordsworth. The belief we all have that truly great art, a song, a movie, whatever, has to come from a place of genuine, honest feeling, that's Wordsworth. Even our basic psychological understanding that our memories are what shape our identity, a lot of that has its roots right here in his vision.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. Wordsworth believed we needed that quiet space, that tranquility, to really process our emotions and turn them into something meaningful. So I guess the question for us is, in our world of constant notifications, endless scrolling, and just digital noise, where do we find our tranquility? How can we possibly make the space to understand what it is we truly feel?